Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us once again on Grit Machine DNA podcast. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Patrick McNamara. He's the president of the Massachusetts State Police Association. He's a military veteran, and he's somebody that I really respect, and I'm excited to interview today. Patrick, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm honored to have you, man. So look, we're going to dive right into Grit Machine DNA. We interview incredible people doing incredible things. So we're going to jump right in. Who are you?
That's a great question. So, currently, as you said, I'm the president of the State Police Association. I'm a father of three. I have a daughter and two boys. I'm a husband. We're going on our 10-year anniversary this August. A Army veteran. I deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. Just a guy locally from Massachusetts who's in a pretty cool role right now.
That's pretty awesome. So what defines Patrick?
Yeah, so I guess the definition of me changes as I progressed in life. I grew up in Taunton originally, so different demeanor. My father was a Marine and a state trooper. And so, I guess the definition of my life stemmed from him originally, and also through just actions that occurred in society, such as like 9/11. I was a junior in high school when 9/11 happened, and that defined my path of the military. I went to the Citadel Military College in South Carolina, and from there I went into the 101st Airborne Division as a commissioned officers. A couple of deployments later, and then I had this calling to be like my father and go into the police. During that whole time, my parents were together until his passing this past in December. And they kind of were the epitome of what I idolized as a relationship. And me and my wife have been together for 16 years, but going on 10 for married.
That's awesome. So, Patrick, I want to go back. One of the things we do here is get to know people so that the listener or viewer gets a real context and a sense for the person. So let's talk a little bit about your early years, because we're going to get to the point of how you did what you did. But you mentioned something really important, your father. So let's talk about the early years of Patrick and the people who really inspired you to do what you're doing and who you are.
Yeah, my father was my hero. He was the guy I idolized, that I looked up to. He really helped define my path. Like I said, I grew up in Taunton.
Yep.
I was fortunate enough, my parents were able to afford Coyle Cassidy, which was a private school. But even there, after getting out of Coyle, I didn't really know where I thought. I just wanted to go to war and just fight. My father really directed me and encouraged that I went and got an education, so that as I got out of college or after I went into the military, that I would have something. Because back in the day, an education back then was something coveted and looked at.
Yeah.
So when I saw how passionate it was for my father, it really helped me define kind of that pathway.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I really want to underscore here is the importance of your father in your life. Like me, my father's my hero, and he inspires me every day. And I hope that one of the takeaways from today for listeners or viewers is the importance of fathers in the role of young men and women in their upbringing. So thank you for sharing that, Patrick. Let's get a little bit into, you said you grew up in Taunton, etc. You went into the military. Did you enlist because of your father, or why did you enlist?
Yeah, so my father was enlisted during Vietnam as a Marine. So not only with education, but he also encouraged being a commissioned officer. I was a commander in the military, and I think that no matter what direction an American chooses to go, serving your country is the greatest thing you can do for our nation, whether it be enlisted or officer. And so in my upbringing, going to a military school was probably the best for me to succeed, because I did like to have fun and So a military school was the best thing for me to go to. And it was also something that I was really into. I was really into that style of academics and training.
So that's wonderful. So we get into the service. What prompted that service? Was it 9/11? You mentioned 9/11. What prompted you to say, I'm going from Citadel to the military?
Yeah, so as a kid, growing up, I always thought, playing Night Army and all that was really cool. And then when you idolize, a father figure who was a Marine, and a trooper, I kind of think the pathway was easy for me, but it kind of segues, in which we can talk later, about that was really kind of the only path I saw.
Wow.
I think that in a lot of society and a lot of, younger generation now, they sit in their seats and they try to look at what they want to do next in life, but without exposure and a sense of direction, they kind of just go with whatever is normal to them or seems apparent,
Yeah.
and so going to the Citadel. When I was at the Citadel, I had exposure to the Marines. So the Citadel is you can go in the Marine Corps, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps. You can go into any of those service branches. And while I was there, I had just great relationships with a lot of the active duty NCOs and officers that were there. And they talked about opportunity. And that was kind of the first segue that I kind of left my father's shadow. And I went to the right, to the Army. He would still fly the flags at the house and ride. It would go, U.S. flag,
Yeah.
Marine flag, and then Army. He'd always say that, but we won't hold him against him,
My father, Navy man, would disagree with you.
I know. I think, coming out of the Citadel, it was kind of an easy path, and we were, that was in 2007 that I graduated, so we were like in the middle of the war. And then I had the opportunity to go to the 101st Airborne Division and 3rd Brigade Rakkasans. And when I was there, 2 weeks on the ground, I was immediately sent over to Iraq with the men. And I was able, we came back home 11 months later. We were in Afghanistan.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your service. Let me ask you a question about that because I want to transition to the next step, the next evolution of beyond your career, military career. What were the key lessons you learned during your military service?
Well, there's a lot, right? And I think a lot of your lessons and life lessons are based on who's around you and the experiences that you're exposed to. As a commissioned officer, there are senior enlisted soldiers that are, senior NCOs that really take you as a young kid, and even though you're in charge, you're not really in charge.
Right.
They're in charge, right? And really mold you to become a leader, right? And then your senior leaders, like your captains and your company commanders, they really mold you into being an officer.
Yeah.
So depending on who surrounds you is how you become that leader. I think it's also about exposure. I was fortunate enough to go to some of the most challenging courses the United States Army could offer: Airborne School, Air Assault, Pathfinder, Ranger School, all within the scope of within the deployments and before. And each school taught you a lesson about yourself.
Yeah.
Whether it be mentally challenging, physically challenging, spiritually challenging, because some days you're just like, why am I here and what am I doing?
Yep.
So I think the military experience kind of molds you. It creates that next stage. It created that next stage for me.
Yeah. So how did you get to the state police part? And part of what's interesting for me here, Patrick, is another person I interviewed, incredible American, Steve Archer, who's a fire chief in Lynn, one of the things we talked about is how do we expose more kids to jobs like firefighting, state police, and military. And here's another incredible example of somebody who had incredible military career and now is the president of the state police union. How did you make that transition to from military to state police? How did that happen?
Yeah. So really it goes back again to that pathway. I was only really ever exposed to that world of policing. So kind of the story goes like this. In my life, living in Taunton, success was kind of defined by 4 occupations, at least in my world it was. Police, firefighter, electrician, and plumber.
Wow.
Nobody really wore a suit and tie that I ever knew of.
Wow.
That didn't really exist. So
Wow.
when I was looking at direction in life, I kind of already had a pre-planned path. That was just my natural occurrence. Like my parents took care of me. They afforded me the opportunity to go to the schools that I did and pay for my college. And so it was kind of that natural progression. I actually took the police exam. I flew home from the military, took the exam, flew back, and then later, a few years later, so that was about in 2009 that I took the exam, and then a few years later, I became a Plymouth police officer first, for a short 11 months, and then transitioned over to the state police, off the same exam. It was the first one they had in like 6.5 years as the Commonwealth for the state police. So it was a natural progression for me, but something that I kind of thought I was always going to go.
Yeah, what I'm hearing here, this is another important lesson that I want to underscore is you knew what you wanted. At least this was the role you thought you were going to play, so you were going after it, number one. And number two, the discipline and tenacity to actually pursue it and carry it through. It's pretty impressive. So let me ask you then, you're how many years as a police officer and how many years as state police thus far?
So as a police officer in whole, I was only with Plymouth for shy of a year. And then with the state police, I'm over 10 and a half. So around 11 and a half, 12 years if you include the academies.
Okay. So
as a police officer in Mass.
Helpful. So over 11 years as a police officer in general. So this is not meant to be a charge question because there's people out there who have a different view of police officers. I embrace police officers. My brother was a police officer. But what are the key, if we were sitting here with a 5 or 7 or 10-year-old, what would you say, Patrick, to that young adolescent about your career, whether or not that person was interested in pursuing it? What would you say? It's a good career, it's a tough one, what would you say?
Yeah, so, I mean, I have an 8, a 6, and a 3-year-old, so I'm having those conversations now. The profession of law enforcement has significantly changed. And I've only been for a short time, right? So
Yeah.
only 11 years. But the profession of law enforcement and our society has changed. How you operate as a police officer, it's just different now. And it's challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, in most police departments, you're walking in an incredibly low morale, where police officers feel attacked, and not even physically, just emotionally, by the media, by our politicians, by our leaders in our communities, by our citizens, right? They feel as though, based on incidents over the last few years, and even greater, but specifically the last few years, sort of maybe like betrayal. And the most challenging thing about it, and I explained it earlier, is that my whole path in life was always to be a police officer. And then to finally get to a profession that you feel is like this ultimate sacrifice to community over self, and then to really be demonized in some aspects, is challenging, very challenging. So I don't really know if I answered your question.
What would you say to the 10-year-old? This is the right thing for you to do, or pursue something else?
I think I'd talk about pathways.
Yeah.
I would say there are a lot of things in life we can do.
Yeah.
Being police are one of them.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's the answer.
Yeah.
There are people that help police officers. There are people that are attorneys and accountants and financials You could be a firefighter. You could be a nurse,
Yep.
a doctor,
Yeah.
a CEO of a company someday. You could be all these things. So then I would say, what do you like to do?
Yeah.
And if what you like to do is on this angle, well, then we should explore. But maybe we should see all the other opportunities out there and just really broaden our mind.
Yeah.
I think is the key there.
Love it.
Instead of definitively defining that you like to play, a certain game, so you should be a police officer.
Yeah.
Well, that may not be it. Let's not narrow our thought process, and let's open our minds and our eyes to like what we can do in life.
Love the answer. Think big. Think
right.
big. I love it.
That's right.
So, one of the things that I really loved about Patrick when I met you was your passion. And what stood out for me was the passion you brought to the table about the job you were doing as a state police union president, but more importantly, the passion you exhibited and how you spoke about protecting, advancing, enabling, and promoting the members, the state police teammates. Can you talk about why you're so passionate about that?
Yeah, I think there's only so many people in society during today's time that can really speak on tough subjects. My position being one of them. And being in school as I am right now, and being there as a police officer during a time of just a horrible time in our society, it's really kind of focused me to say, all right, well, how do I show society that the portrayal that's occurring on the media is not like who we really are? And so I think that the progression as an officer is paramount in my duties.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've said is it's challenging for me to talk about how a citizen, black, brown, somebody different than me,
Yep.
how they feel. Because I have no idea.
Yep.
But it's my duty to try to understand and try to have creative solutions to fix that.
Yeah.
And I think we fix that through conversation and having an educated discussion like we are today.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. Open dialogue. I want to underscore a couple themes here. One is open dialogue, communication, and the ability to agree to disagree and still be amicable.
100%.
Love that answer. The other part about it, Patrick, I love is you have this passion about you, but it's also very controlled in a way that helps people come to you to have that conversation. So appreciate that a lot. So let's talk a little bit about your family, because one of the things I like to highlight is the fatherhood aspect of who we are.
Right.
So I want to first talk about your wife. What's it been like to be a married man and under such duress? And then we'll talk about being a father. So what's it like to be a married man under such stress?
I don't know, we should ask my wife. So my wife's name is Erin. She's from New Jersey. We met, she went to the College of Charleston. I went to the Citadel. All right, so I was one of the people they warned her not to hang out with. And when I was deployed, we were still dating at the time, and we stuck through all of the conversations when I was downrange, and all the trials and tribulations that come from that. And even today, as a wife to a husband who's a police officer, I talk a lot about. I don't really know what it's like to be in her shoes, but I can sympathize that most significant others, wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, when they say goodbye to a police officer that night or during that day or that shift, they don't really know if they're ever going to come home. And I think there's just and there's an expectation that we will lay our life on the line for the citizens of the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of really feeds into the strength that our significant others have. Now I have 3 babies. In this role I am specifically, I'm not really home much. And so the challenge can be that she has to take all that burden of uncertainty, ensuring that our household is in order in the sense that our children are growing up and understanding where dad is, and then being present, right? Because I when I was in the military, I talk a lot about when I was in the military, I was active duty, then I went in the National Guard after. I was a commander in the Guard. It's about wearing hats, right? And so when you're in this position as, the president position, you wear a president hat. Yeah. It doesn't mean that that's how you truly are as an individual. Yep. It's just it's your role and responsibility. Mm-hmm. When we stop somebody on the side of the highway, a trooper stops you on the side of the highway and you think, oh my God, that guy or girl was just so aggressive. Yeah. It's the role because we don't know what we're walking into, right, and we got to go home safe at night. That's right. And then when you go home and you're with your family, your dad, your husband, your best friend, your brother. So you wear all these different hats. And so, I think that you just need to have a very strong, significant other to really succeed in this career, because a lot of police officers do bring home a lot of emotional struggle from what we see from day to day. Yeah. I mean, a lot of our troopers are in homicide units. Mm-hmm. They're on every highway. All the crashes were things that people slow down and take pictures of the gruesome cars. Well, we're in the middle of it. We were first there, right? So that's seen as you're driving by as a citizen, saying, "Oh, look how bad that car is." Yeah. We saw what happened, and then 2 seconds later, you need to go have lunch, and then you got to go home to your little kids. Yeah. When that could have been a little kid that probably or could have died in that car. And so I think that the burden that the police officer brings home really impacts your relationships. And if you don't have a strong one, you're definitely going to be challenged on this job. Yeah. With this profession, at least. Yeah. So basically, my takeaway is you got a pretty darn strong wife, number one. Yeah. And number two, she is the anchor. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, appreciate you sharing that, man. Mm-hmm. So, fatherhood. Mm-hmm. You mentioned you're away from home a lot. You got 3 babies, to use your words. What's that like? Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, you have to have a strong home to understand and to keep your family up. Yeah. And so, when my wife watches this, she will. She's like my biggest fan, right? And vice versa. Right, 100%. She'll call me one day, or she'll call me and FaceTime me and have the kids say thank you to me. Wow. And, wow, that goes a long way. That's incredible. And it goes a long way as, like, the father, but it also goes a long way as, like, she's teaching our kids to understand what sacrifice is, and why I'm doing what I'm doing, whether it be in this role or just as a state trooper in Massachusetts. But for my children, I really try not to talk about work when I'm home. It's just a little challenging in this role because my phone's always ringing. But I try to keep, when I'm home, and I try to separate the difference. Yeah. Like today, I'm home, I'm dad. Yeah. And when I'm at work, I'm different. Yeah. So I think, and again, I only see one-sided, right? So I'm only seeing my perspective. That's right. You interview my wife, she might tell you something completely different. So, I just think that when you're home, be present. Yeah. Sure. And then if you have a strong foundation in your household, it really helps support your dreams. Yeah, for sure. And your activities or what you're trying to get accomplished. Yeah. Especially for like what we're doing today. That's awesome. Yeah. I'm gonna go a little harder on you. Come on at me. I know you can take it here. What are the 3? If you had to say there were 3 principal values you're teaching your children, or you and Aaron are teaching your children, what are those 3 principal values? It's a great question. We can come back to it too. Oh, no. I'm good. one is family. It's always family first,
Yeah.
no matter what.
Love that.
Whether that means that you're not disrespecting your mom,
Yeah.
you're not talking back, whether, you know, you stick up for your little brother on the bus, you know, whatever that may be, it's teaching them that what's here today is your core.
Yeah.
So I think family is by far
Family first.
first.
Love it.
You know, we do a lot about just being honorable, and I say that in the sense that, like, and as a child,
Yeah. What does that mean?
yeah, as a child, it looks like not lying, right? It looks like just being an honorable person. Like,
Yeah.
if you did something wrong, just like stand up and say, I did something wrong here. And it could be small, anything from maybe taking a toy from your little brother and then just saying, no, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
And then being held accountable, right? So that's a huge importance. And by no means I'm not like Mr. Dad here, right? But these are just some core values in our household that we try to do.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's really just, it's family and being honorable.
Yeah. What's the
And then
third?
I think the last one is just like love, right?
Yeah.
We
Cool.
unconditionally love each other. We can get upset
Yeah.
and then quickly calm it down and like not hold grudges, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's what that's at least what's helped me and my wife in our long-term relationship,
Yeah.
which has been, we can kind of get on each other real fast, but we don't hold. It's like you get it out, you talk about it,
Yeah.
it's over, separate if you got to do it, come back, give
Yeah.
each other a kiss, a hug, and, you know, at some point people fall on the sword on either end, but it can't be one-sided.
Yeah.
And then you got to move forward. You don't hold grudges 3, 4, 5 days later, because that's when it just burns.
Yeah.
You just be quick and to the point. So I think, you know, teaching your kids just ultimate effectual love, you know, giving them a hug, giving them a kiss. One of my good friends, DJ Dolan, was on the SWAT team with me. One of the things he said to me, I do an association leadership conference every month, and I had brought him on to teach
Yeah.
about just like self-reflection. And one of the things he did, and I love, and I take it with me, is when your kids are very excited to see you.
Yeah.
The first second you walk through the door, and after that, it's okay. It's the excitement's gone, right? Just kind of like a dog too. So what is that visual, and what does that impact look like?
Yeah.
And with a lot of police officers, and I did it myself, and I've been trying to work on it since. I'm so heated and hot from the day. I just walk in, I'm like, I need a break, separate. And your kids, like, they were so excited to see you.
Yeah.
And then they just get told to separate and walk away, and you missed it. You missed an opportunity to make a huge impact, right? And so what his recommendation is, you pull into the driveway, you give yourself like a 2-minute just breathing, just meditate for a second, breathe, get yourself ready for that hello, because they've missed you all day long. Go in, do that for your family,
Yeah.
and then go decompress.
Wow.
And so I found that so important. And I think that kind of encompasses everything with family,
Yes.
being honorable to your family and yourself, and then love.
Awesome lesson. So, to me, you can apply that to life, right? So, family first, of course, and I love how you use it for the family. But think about using that method at work, right? To avoid unnecessary arguments or issues. Think about using that on the street, right? Somebody says something stupid. Let me just decompress first, right? Take a break, right?
Right.
I love that lesson. That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit. Now that we've covered family, we've talked career. I want to cover a subject that I ask everybody about. What's leadership to you?
So leadership is challenging. That's a challenging topic to
Everybody
easily
throws
talk
it
about.
around.
They all talk about
There's
it.
leaders
The
everywhere.
one thing that I have always said with a company called The Program, it's a leadership consulting company that I used to work with, is that to lead by example.
Yeah.
That's what they say. And that is the most proverbial thing. Leaders don't lead by example. You set the example and people follow. right? So that's your expectation as a leader. You set the example, and they follow. And that's accredited back to, the company called the program.
Yeah.
It's very important, right? And then the next question a lot of people say is, well, can you teach somebody to be a leader, or are you just naturally a leader?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's an inherent leadership trait in people, whether it's extreme or not.
Yeah.
Just people make decisions. You make a decision in life, and you can do it. Sometimes you're on a team, sometimes you don't. But what I do think is that you can teach a person how to really rip back the layers and become a good leader, right? If you don't have any exposure or influence from good leaders, then how are you ever going to become something? And then you have other people that define leadership through different life exposures, and then they take the good things then they learn from all these different people, and then they create the leader who they want to be.
Yeah.
So I think that leadership is all about setting the example, because nobody is going to follow somebody if they don't actually say what they do, or do what they say rather.
Yeah. So when talking about leadership, Patrick, this is another important topic for listeners, viewers, and it's a hot topic that typically comes up. Follow your leaders. Leaders know what's best for you. If you had to help the folks listening or watching understand leaders, could you give us a couple of examples from years past of folks that have served as leaders, other than your father, who's one of your co-anchors, of people who served as leaders for you in your development, and why? Let me give you context for the question. Every one of us has made it here with a network, right? There are always people in your path. I always like to say God always put wonderful people in my path, still does, for future development, for me to grow. So give us tangible examples of who those people were and why.
Man, that's a great question too. I mean, leaders can be just your friends too, right?
Yep.
Your friends at some given point can just do something inherently that you look to them and be like, wow, I'm like impressed.
Yeah.
Like that was great show of leadership. It might just be correlated to just a call that a trooper has, and all of a sudden you're on scene and it's kind of really chaotic, and you just have one trooper that just stands up and says, hey, I need you guys to go over there, do that, do this, an incredible amount of times. I mean, you look at all of like Medal of Honor recipients.
Yeah.
I mean, read those write-ups, and you're like, wow, right? And it's like that person, another thing, rose to the occasion, but did they, or was that just them?
Yeah.
Right? Did they really rise to the occasion, or were they just put in a scenario that allowed them to be the person they are, right? Because who knows if you were in the same spot to them, how you would act.
Exactly.
But they do incredible things. I have officers. I mean, literally every unit has just people that have just taught me how to be a leader.
Yeah.
And it's not really like one person. And the one person that I defined is my father. I mean, he was just a consistent example for me of what I aspired to be like in my eyes. But whether it be in the military, at school, as a kid, coaches, in sports,
That's where I was going.
Yeah, I think it's
going
just
there because
everybody.
you mentioned the Citadel, that there were people who became sort of like the folks you started thinking about, maybe I could do that.
Right.
Folks who sort of guided you down a path, because you definitely weren't a Marine, like
Right.
your dad, you went Army. So there must have been people guiding you, at least from a leadership perspective, of what to do.
Yeah, I mean, but it wasn't like, it never was like one person. I was always just around, just like, I always had the fortunate experiences of just being around people that are just true leadership.
Wow.
And I mean,
That's cool.
I think if you would probably go ask some of the lieutenants that worked for me as a commander, they'd tell you that I'm not I did a lot of things that they took away that were well, and there was things they probably didn't like about me, but we got the mission done, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't even say that like my leadership role is on point. I just think that you're kind of almost become a product of your environment,
Yeah.
of exposures and of the people you're surrounded by. You do take the positives and the negatives. I mean, in my current role right now, there are people that are with me every day that I learn from and teach me. And I guess so leadership in this realm would be just having an open mind and not being so like closed-minded that your idea is the best.
Yeah.
Almost like create a team environment and establish like what you want to get to. Establish those boundaries. Like you can't go outside of this line, you can't go outside of that line,
Yep.
but I need to get us to the end here.
Yep.
And however your team gets you there, it doesn't really matter. As long as they don't go outside the boundaries and we meet the mission, you have full buy-in
Yep.
and you're going to accomplish the goal, or what the end state is. And I think that is, at least from my life, that's been leadership.
So I have two takeaways here. The first one is you are and continue to be surrounded by incredible people that serve as like leaders, right? Which is incredible. That's a lesson in itself for people, right? Surround yourself with incredible people that help help you understand how to lead. And then the other takeaway is that this is a development, right? This is a process. Leadership isn't like, hey, it's actions, but it's also development in how we grow to be a person considered to be a leader or learn from others that can help us to sharpen the pencil of our leadership style. So I love that. That was really cool. So let me get to a couple more questions that become a little more personal, if that's okay.
Sure.
I want to go back to one of the things that we flew over in talking about the Citadel and your college experience, and you basically knew what you wanted to do. So now that we've got the big picture in the capsule of your timeline as to who you are and what you've done, I want to go back to a couple of pivotal points that I think I heard today. The first one was the Citadel, right? Here you were in college. You already sort of had your sights on being a police officer. You'd said you liked to party, all good. So how do we speak to folks who are in high school thinking about their college and their next steps? What does a Patrick McNamara say to that folk or that young person who's thinking about going to college or going to the military? How does that decision get made? Now, it was made for you, right? You knew your parents wanted you to go to college. They wanted you to be in a career, military or something, etc. That's great. But how about those folks who may not have that strong foundation or guidance? What would you say to them and say, look, there's either college or there's this? How would you advise them?
A kid that's narrow-minded and doesn't want to see anything greater or more is only going to go with what they're only exposed to. So,
So you if you can't see it, you can't be it.
if you don't even want to entertain it or attain it, if you're just happy with status quo, you're gonna have a really challenging time figuring out a tough path. Just my perspective.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
If whether you're making a decision of you want to go trades or into the college or enlist in the military, I think it's all about your situation. I don't think there's one simple. I don't think there's an answer for every child, kid, high school kid. It really is, what is your current situation and where do you want to go? What do you want to get to?
Yeah.
And so I think that if you want to go into college, and even if you don't have the grades or the finances to go into college, you have to look at, okay, well, I know that I want to go in, I know I want to get there. How do I pay for it? What do I got to do to get accepted? That's your first question,
Yeah.
right? How do I get accepted? All right, well, that's probably step one. How do I get accepted? Now, how do I pay for this thing? With the military, they'll take anybody. Just go take the test. So that one's kind of easy. And with trades, it's go into your local unions. They're everywhere, right? Go talk to people, right? You got to be able to solicit what you're trying to get after. If you're not inquisitive, if you're not trying to grow, if you're not trying to understand, nobody I mean, nobody, unless you're in a very fortunate situation, is just going to give you anything. 'Cause you're going to have to work and you're going to have to grind. You're going to have to do everything you can to get where you want to go. And so I think it's like you really need to just have an open mind, and you got to want it. You got to get that phone number, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So look, this is important. So first and foremost, I'm a big believer in this, Patrick. So thank you. So first of all, understand what your options are, right? Educate yourself by understanding your options. But there's something really important you said right at the beginning, which is if you don't want it, you're never going to get it, right? The second piece is expand your horizons. What are all the options, and understand them all deeply. Then the third one was go work for it.
That's right.
You got to work for it. That leads me to the next question, Patrick. Look, I am sitting here with the president of the Massachusetts State Police Association, one person who essentially is the spokesperson, the representative, the lead advocate, the person who essentially takes all of the tough and bad and good for the state police officers who protect us. How did that happen? I mean, you're young, you're passionate, you're tenacious. I get some of the DNAs there, but how, for those of us that are listening and watching, how does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I when I came on the state police, I for sure didn't think I wanted to be in the union executive position. That wasn't something I aspired to be in when I came on. A natural progression for me was to go on our SWAT team. I ended up being a sniper with our STOP team, which is our special tactical operations team. After time with them, I had the opportunity to go into homicides, so I went over to the homicide unit. And I just got really in-tuned and, frankly disgruntled on what was happening with our union at the time, and not feeling represented in some aspects. And so I decided that I needed to do something about it.
Yeah.
And so, I ended up leaving homicide, and I ran, and I was the vice president. And then after 2 years as vice president, I just recently ran, and then won the election, took over in January as the president. So it really was about just a call that I just needed to do that because it needed to happen.
You wanted to change
needed
circumstances.
Change. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And you took an action. I love it, man. So I'm going to ask you two more questions that I ask all the folks that join me on Grit Machine DNA. The first question is, what would you say to 12-year-old Patrick?
Yeah. I think it would just be more, oh man, that's tough. That's a tough question, right?
Knowing what you know now,
Knowing
right?
what I
Looking
know now,
back,
right?
saying, man, what would I say?
Yeah, I think it would just be open your mind. I mean, you know what? I feel like I just had a fortunate opportunity to have just a ton of great exposure in life, and I think that my family has been there for me the entire. My friends that I've established my relationship. I don't know if I really would say much other than, I guess, kind of enjoy the ride. You know what I mean? Because it's going to be a hell of a ride. And then I think the same thing will happen with, like, when I'm 60, when I'm 70. And I say, what do you say to that 37-year-old, man right now? Yeah. And I think it's going to be probably the same thing. Like, what a hell of a ride.
Buckle up.
Because I'm nowhere done, and I have a lot more to do and to accomplish. Yeah. This is just the beginning.
Yeah.
So it's just been a really, I've been very fortunate to have a really great life.
Yeah.
And a lot of trials and tribulations. And I learned a lot of things in life, but I don't think I would ever change it, because every single thing that's happened to me, good, bad, and different, has defined who I am, and has allowed me to change and adapt and evolve into who I believe I am today.
Yeah.
As a professional, as a father, as a friend. So just buckle up.
Buckle up. All right, here's the last one. What is your purpose? You said you're not done, so what's your purpose?
Yeah, I think my purpose in life is to set my family up for something that I never had. Right? It's to afford an opportunity to my kids that me and my wife were never exposed to. And at the end of the day, and you look back at life and you say to yourself, well, how'd it go? I think a reflection will be based on, how did your children end up?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean did they end up very wealthy or not. Are they like just good people, right? Because just good people, good honorable people that are family oriented and love each other.
Yeah.
If they are that, then I think that's where you want to leave yourself in life.
So your purpose is to build
My family.
better family, better legacy. That's awesome, man. Patrick, thank you for joining us today. This is Patrick McNamara. He's the president of the Massachusetts State Police Association, military veteran, somebody I respect. Hope you enjoyed it today. For more information, check out www.davidamorales.com and check out Grip Machine DNA podcast. Patrick, any final words?
Nah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Just keep grinding.
All right, keep grinding. Thanks, everybody. Si vives día a día en un abismo de dolor y buscas solución a tus problemas, busca del Señor y sigue su camino y pronto nacerá la paz en tu corazón. Y con la paz del Señor yo he vencido mi temor y yo vivo victorioso por su amor. Y con la paz del Señor yo he vencido mi temor y yo vivo victorioso por su amor. Si vives día a día en un abismo de dolor y buscas solución a tus problemas, busca del Señor y sigue su camino.